When you buy a brand new smartphone, it just comes with a default operating system. Like, you don't choose it.
Right. You don't program it at all.
Exactly. It's just there. It's running quietly in the background, dictating literally everything.
Yeah, how fast your battery drains, what notifications pop up, all of it.
Right. And most of us, we never really question that factory installed code. We just swipe and tap and, react entirely according to the rules that were just handed to us on day one.
We really do.
But imagine if, I don't know, 30 or 40 years into using that exact same phone, you suddenly realized you could root the device. Like, you could literally rewrite the operating system from the ground up.
That would change everything.
It totally would. And while that is exactly what we are doing in today's deep dive for you guys, we're doing a total psychological system reboot by exploring Don Miguel Ruiz's monumental 1997 book, The Four Agreements.
But, we should probably clarify right away that we
Right.
are not just doing some surface-level book summary here.
Oh, definitely not.
Yeah, to give you the absolute ultimate shortcut to being well-informed, we are synthesizing a stack of completely different sources. We've got Ruiz's original texts, obviously,
Right.
but we're also cross-referencing that with clinical psychology from Psychology Today, a really fascinating master's thesis from Cal State San Bernardino that applies these rules to modern workplace leadership.
That one was super interesting.
It really was. We also brought in insights from clinical therapist Terry Cole, an Omega Institute interview with the Ruiz family, and honestly, perhaps most importantly, some highly critical Reddit threads.
Oh man, the Reddit threads. I love that we included those because, some of the pushback there is just incredibly valid.
It forces us to figure out the actual mechanisms, right? Like, how do these ideas actually function in the real world?
Exactly. Our mission today is to look past the sort of mystical framing of the book and extract the raw, hidden psychological mechanisms. We are going to unpack how your childhood conditioning completely hijacked your behavior.
And we'll piece together a step-by-step transformation roadmap so you can actually apply this stuff to your modern life. Dating, office politics, your own internal monologue.
Without feeling totally overwhelmed by it all.
Right. So let's dive into the hardware. Ruiz starts by talking about something he calls human domestication.
Yeah, domestication. It's basically the foundational concept for this entire philosophy. So, keeping with that smartphone analogy, when you're born, your mind is basically this pristine, perfectly functioning piece of hardware, right?
Right. You're genuine, playful, totally uninhibited.
You're just a baby. You cry when you're hungry, you laugh when you're happy. There are no complicated filters.
But then, almost immediately, the installation process begins. Society, your parents, teachers, culture, they all start installing this operating system of rules and fears and expectations.
And judgments, too. Lots of judgments.
Oh, absolutely. Ruiz calls this collective programming the dream of the planet. And if we look at our clinical psychology sources, this isn't just like a poetic metaphor. It is a highly documented psychological phenomenon.
Yeah. Right. Psychology Today actually points out that the famous psychologist Carl Rogers called this exact process developing conditions of worth.
Yes, conditions of worth.
Meaning, like, I only have worth if I meet these specific conditions, right?
Precisely. It's these arbitrary standards that children learn they absolutely must follow to receive love or, just to avoid being punished or left out.
That is so intense when you think about it.
It is. And another pioneer, Eric Berne, he referred to it as a life script. It's a completely unconscious set of instructions for living that you just adopt before you even have the cognitive ability to argue against it.
Because kids are basically hostages to their environment.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't have the capacity to debate grammar or societal norms.
No, not at all. If the adults tell them they're inherently smart, they just download that code and believe it.
But if they're told they're inadequate or too loud or just not athletic enough, they download that too.
Exactly. They're exactly like the prisoners in Plato's cave,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Just looking at shadows on the wall and assuming it is absolute reality.
And what really struck me in the research is how this early conditioning creates what Ruiz calls the inner judge.
Ah, yes, the inner judge.
Because we download all these conditions of worth, we develop this relentless, hypercritical voice in our own heads. And it's just constantly measuring us against this impossible image of perfection.
Which is the core mechanism of all our emotional suffering.
Right. You spend your entire adult life exhausting yourself, trying to meet a standard you didn't even create.
Which brings us to the tension between what Ruiz calls fear-based living versus freedom-based living. A fear-based life is one where you are entirely ruled by that inner judge.
You're running on malware, basically.
Essentially, yeah. You
Mm.
constantly play the victim to your own programming. But a freedom-based life begins the exact moment you realize those old agreements are just lines of code.
And you have the administrator privileges to delete them.
Right. You can just write new ones.
Now, I do want to pause here and just push back on one piece of context because while reading the original text, Ruiz constantly frames all this as ancient Toltec wisdom.
Right.
But when I looked at the anthropological sources in those academic papers, the history doesn't really line up. Like, academics point out that the term Toltec was popularized by writers like Carlos Castaneda to mean a receiver and holder of mysteries, or like a sorcerer.
Yeah, rather than strictly referring to the historical Mesoamerican Empire.
Exactly.
That is a very crucial distinction, for sure. And it's a fair critique as how the book is marketed. But what's fascinating is the academic consensus urges us to view the word Toltec in this specific context as just a metaphor.
Like a symbol.
Yeah, it represents a transcultural, universal tradition of deep psychological mastery. If we get too bogged down in the literal history, we actually miss the psychology.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So looking back at this idea of domestication, it really makes you wonder about your own daily routine. Like, what if I just identified one single habit that I do every day purely out of a sense of societal obligation?
And you just stop doing it?
Yeah, like for 1 week.
Yeah.
What would actually happen?
Well, that is a fantastic diagnostic test for your internal operating system. It forces this moment of profound self-awareness.
Because the main lesson of this first section is really that your current reality and limiting beliefs were programmed into you by society. But you have the power to rewrite the code.
Exactly. And the toxic belief we need to remove here is, I am inherently flawed because I don't meet society's expectations.
Right. So the new belief to build is I am free to define my own values and reject the arbitrary rules of my domestication.
Beautifully said. And for a reflective question for you listening, ask yourself, what is one rule about how you must live your life that you accepted as a child, but it no longer serves you?
That's a powerful question to sit with. And realizing we have the power to write new code naturally brings us to, well, where do we begin?
You begin with the very first line of new code. The first agreement, be impeccable with your word.
Right. And Ruiz goes so far as to call words a form of magic, like white magic that creates or black magic that destroys.
Yeah, words have immense weight.
But initially, that just sounds like, hey, don't gossip, be a nice person, always tell the truth. But we looked at some really intense Reddit debates about this chapter, and people were pushing back hard.
Oh, they definitely were.
Yeah, one user made a great point. They asked, what if you're in a situation where you genuinely need to lie or deceive someone to protect yourself or to protect someone else?
Right.
Isn't this blanket rule of always tell the truth just incredibly naive?
Well, if you take it completely literally, yes, that critique is totally spot on. But we have to look deeper at the actual word impeccable.
Okay, let's unpack that.
It comes from a Latin root meaning without sin. Now, in a traditional religious context, a sin is an offense against a higher power. But in this specific psychological framework, a sin is anything you do that goes against yourself.
Oh, wow, against yourself.
Therefore, judging yourself, blaming yourself, or harshly criticizing yourself is literally sinning against yourself.
Okay, so it's less about whether or not you tell a polite white lie to your friend about their haircut, and way more about that toxic internal monologue you direct at yourself.
Exactly. And psychology today explicitly connects this first agreement to the early pioneers of cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
Like Aaron Beck and Albert Ellis.
Yes. The deepest psychological message here is about eliminating the irrational, toxic chatter that you inflict upon your own psyche. Think about self-fulfilling prophecies.
Oh, yeah. Those are huge.
They are entirely born from the words we repeat internally. If your inner judge constantly tells you that you are a failure, your brain unconsciously looks for evidence to prove that word true.
And then your actions just naturally align with that negative reality.
Wow. Using your word against yourself literally alters your reality. It destroys your self-worth and breeds constant anxiety.
So mastering this agreement fundamentally changes you because it finally mutes that inner judge. You're using your words as building blocks to create a supportive reality rather than tearing yourself down.
Which is why a great real-world action step for this is to try going just 24 hours without complaining or gossiping about anyone.
Which sounds hard enough.
Right. But the hardest part is that this explicitly includes zero complaining or negative talk about yourself.
Oh man, 24 hours. I bet most people couldn't last a single hour without thinking something harsh about themselves.
It's incredibly difficult.
Uh,
But it forces you to realize how often you use your internal voice as a weapon to punish yourself for past mistakes.
Which is a great reflective question for our listeners. How often do you use your internal monologue to punish yourself?
Too often, for most of us.
Yeah. So the main lesson here is that your words are the building blocks of your reality. Use them to create, not destroy.
And the toxic belief to remove is that harsh self-criticism makes me a better, more productive person.
Which is such a common trap. The new belief we need to build is my words hold immense power and I choose to use them to support myself and others.
Exactly. But that internal punishment often dictates how vulnerable we feel when we interact with the outside world.
Which perfectly transitions us to the second agreement. Because if you're learning to control your own words, what do you do about the toxic words of everyone else around you?
Enter the second agreement. Don't take anything personally.
And I just have to say, this is notoriously the hardest one to master. The core concept is realizing that nothing other people do is actually because of you. It's entirely a projection of their own reality, their own dream.
It is easily the most controversial part of the book, too.
Yeah, and for really good reason. I have to bring up the friction here because this chapter sparked absolute outrage in some of the forums we researched.
Let's get into it.
One Reddit user passionately argued that this agreement basically promotes and excuses toxic behavior. They were like, wait, if I run my mouth, insult my partner, and act horribly, can I just turn around and tell them not to take it personally?
Right. It seems like a get-out-of-jail-free card for bad behavior.
Exactly. It strips away all accountability. And it actually gets worse. Another user pointed out a genuinely bizarre, alarming example from the text itself.
Oh, the cancer color example.
Yes. Ruiz suggests that if someone walks up to you and tells you that you have the, quote, cancer color in your face, you will literally develop cancer if you agree with their words. I mean, I physically cringed reading that.
And you definitely should cringe. I'm very glad you brought that up, because if we don't address that critically, the whole philosophy just falls apart.
It really does.
Taken at face value, that cancer quote is not just scientifically absurd, it's highly problematic victim blaming. However, if we synthesize the underlying intention here, using the framework of clinical therapist Tara Cole, we actually find a highly practical psychological tool.
Okay, so rescue this for me. How does Tara Cole explain it?
She emphasizes that not taking things personally is absolutely not about accepting abuse. And it does not excuse other people from accountability.
Okay, that's a relief.
It is strictly a mechanism for protecting your own emotional baseline. Cole points directly to Sigmund Freud's concept of projection as a defense mechanism.
Projection, right.
Yeah, when people attack you or belittle you, they are almost always disavowing their own deeply uncomfortable feelings, their own insecurities, their own bad day, and reassigning them to you.
Oh, to bring the smartphone metaphor back, it's like someone has a virus on their phone and they're trying to connect to my Bluetooth to offload their corrupted files onto my device.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it.
And my job isn't to fix their phone. My job is just to refuse the connection, decline the transfer.
Exactly. Yeah. So if a coworker snaps at you during a meeting, it's likely not because your idea was inherently terrible. It's because they are living in a stressed, insecure, fear-based dream in that specific moment.
Right.
Cole actually outlines practical steps to implement this Bluetooth block. First, she says, you must check the source. There should be a strict hierarchy of whose opinions actually matter.
Like, is the criticism coming from a trusted loved one who genuinely wants you to grow, or is it just some random stranger in traffic?
Exactly. I shouldn't give the same emotional weight to an anonymous internet troll that I give to my spouse.
Oh, for sure.
Second, you have to check for emotional transference within yourself. If a mild comment absolutely ruins your week, you have to ask, am I overreacting because this is triggering an unresolved childhood wound?
Wow. By systematically depersonalizing these interactions, you immediately stopped giving virtual strangers the power to dictate your emotional freedom.
That reframing is incredibly empowering. It shifts you away from the toxic belief that if someone treats you poorly, you must have done something to deserve it.
Instead, the new belief is, I am immune to the subjective projections of others.
Yes. So practically speaking, for a real-world action step, the next time someone cuts you off in traffic and screams at you, instead of taking it personally, just pause.
And ask yourself, what kind of horrible morning is that person going through that's causing them to act so erratically?
Precisely. You stay in your own reality. And the reflection question here is, whose opinions are you currently allowing to dictate your self-worth?
That's a tough one to answer, honestly. But, this raises a new problem. If we can deflect direct attacks by not taking them personally, what do we do about the silence? Like, what do we do about ambiguity?
Ah, yes. Ambiguity. the brain's worst enemy.
Because our brains absolutely despise uncertainty.
We are biologically wired to make meaning out of our surroundings. So when we lack information, we automatically fill in the blanks.
And because we have that inner judge we talked about, we usually fill in those blanks with the absolute worst case scenario.
Right, and this is the exact behavior the third agreement targets. Don't make assumptions.
This one feels so incredibly relevant today, especially with how much we rely on text-based communication.
Oh, text messages and emails are assumption minefields.
Exactly. Let's say I spend an hour drafting a really thoughtful, detailed email to my boss about a project, and 2 hours later, they reply with a single word.
Okay? Just, okay. Period.
Right. Instantly, my brain's predictive text kicks in. I assume they hate the idea. I assume they think I'm incompetent. I assume they're building a case to fire me. I generate all this intense physiological anxiety over 4 letters.
And you just perfectly described what Aaron Beck in cognitive behavioral therapy called mind reading.
Mind reading, yeah.
It's the completely irrational cognitive distortion that we somehow possess the psychic ability to know what others are thinking and feeling.
Which we don't.
No. When we assume, we essentially manufacture emotional suffering out of thin air. You wave at a friend across the street, they don't wave back, and you instantly assume, oh, they're mad at me. I must have offended them at dinner last week.
When in objective reality, they just left their contacts at home and literally could not see you.
Exactly. So how do we fix this bug in the system? Because stopping assumptions feels like trying to stop yourself from breathing.
Yeah, it really does.
The solution is elegant, but it requires immense discipline. As Caracol puts it, you have to stay on your side of the street.
Meaning what, exactly?
You must assume nothing and ask questions. You have to radically acknowledge that reality is highly subjective. As the saying goes, there is your reality, there is my reality, and then there is the truth.
Wow.
By communicating clearly and demanding actual evidence before you allow yourself to react emotionally, you eliminate the vast majority of the interpersonal drama and overthinking that destroy friendships and marriages.
So the main lesson is really that assuming, the motivations of others is the root of most interpersonal drama.
It really is.
And the toxic belief we have to ditch is this romanticized idea that says, well, if they truly cared about me, they would just know what I need without me having to ask.
That belief ruins more relationships than almost anything else.
So the new belief to build is, I am responsible for asking for what I need and seeking clarity when I'm confused.
Yes. And a great action step for this week is to identify one situation where you feel slighted and actively ask the person for their perspective before getting angry.
Just literally ask them.
Just ask. And for self-reflection, ask yourself, what is a recent story you made up in your head about someone else's behavior that turned out to be completely false?
I have too many of those to count, honestly. But, listening to all of this, monitoring every single word I say to myself, actively blocking everyone's emotional projections like a shield, and stopping my brain from making assumptions.
It sounds like a lot.
It sounds utterly exhausting, like it would drain my battery to 0 by noon. How do you consistently apply the first 3 agreements without completely burning out or feeling like a massive failure when you inevitably mess up?
That is the exact question that leads to the 4th agreement, which actually acts as the safety net for the entire philosophy. Always do your best.
Okay, but always do your best sounds like the kind of generic motivational poster you see in a corporate break room.
It does sound cliche at first glance, but the hidden psychological nuance here is profound.
How so?
The core message is that your best is not a static fixed metric. It is not 100% maximum output every single day.
Right.
Your best fluctuates daily, sometimes even hourly. Your best when you are well-rested, highly caffeinated, and healthy is vastly different from your best when you're fighting off a cold or grieving a loss or dealing with chronic stress.
Oh, wow. So recognizing that your capacity is a moving target completely disarms the inner judge. Because the judge demands static perfection.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The judge wants 100% all the time. And I love that we can connect this to the workplace. That master's thesis we reviewed from Cal State San Bernardino specifically analyzed how the 4th agreement applies to modern leadership.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
They found that leaders who strive to do their best without the expectation of an external reward or constant applause naturally develop 3 core traits: transparency, positivity, and authenticity.
Yeah, the thesis cited historical figures like Florence Nightingale and modern leaders like Dr. Alfredo Quinones Hinojosa, the renowned brain surgeon.
Right.
They lead by example, driven purely by intrinsic motivation. They focus on the best possible outcomes for others rather than just feeding their own egos.
When you work from a place of genuine intrinsic care, rather than a desperate fear-based need for external validation, your performance paradoxically skyrockets,
Yeah.
and your internal stress plummets.
Because excellence is no longer about flawless perfection. It's simply about giving whatever honest capacity you have in that present moment.
Exactly. So the main lesson here is that excellence is not about perfection. It is about giving whatever capacity you have right now.
That is such a relief. Because the toxic belief most of us carry is, if I don't perform perfectly at work, at the gym, and as a parent every single day, I am a total failure.
And that's just not true. The new belief is, my best changes daily, and as long as I give my best, I am free from self-judgment.
So practically speaking, for an action step, at the end of a really difficult low-battery day, you can just actively forgive yourself for any shortcomings by acknowledging you did the best you could with the energy you had.
That self-forgiveness is what truly sets you free. And a good reflection question is, are you pushing yourself past your actual limits for external validation, or are you acting out of genuine love for what you do?
Man, that's a deep one. Now, if we look at the evolution of these ideas, there's actually a hidden expansion pack to this operating system that we haven't talked about yet. Yes, introduced years later. Right. Years after publishing the original book, Ruiz and his son, Miguel Ruiz Jr., realized something was missing. So they introduced a fifth agreement. We found this detailed in the Omega Institute interview and corroborated by Psychology Today.
The fifth agreement. Be skeptical, but learn to listen.
I love this one.
This edition is brilliant because it elevates you from merely being a warrior fighting against your old domestication to actually being a master of your own truth. It's the formal reintroduction of logic and reason into the process.
Meaning you don't just blindly accept things anymore.
Exactly. You use deep scrutiny to listen to the world around you without automatically agreeing or blindly disagreeing.
Miguel Ruiz Jr. gave the absolute perfect modern example for this. Fake news and outrage bait on social media.
Oh, it's so prevalent.
Right. When you see a sensational headline that perfectly aligns with your existing political biases, your immediate impulse is to hit share. But acting on that impulse is just another form of being domesticated.
You're just a puppet on a string reacting to a stimuli.
Exactly. The fifth agreement acts as a firewall. You apply skepticism, you pause, you break the cycle of habitual knee-jerk thoughts, you listen to the information, but you scrutinize it, which maintains your ultimate cognitive autonomy.
And if we pull all these threads together and look at the complete transformation roadmap, the before and after is striking.
Let's summarize that. What does the before look like?
Think about what your internal life looks like before updating your operating system. You're entirely living the dream of the planet. You're deeply domesticated.
You wake up anxious, ruled by an inner judge that demands perfection.
Right, you're terrified of making mistakes, you constantly react to the emotional projections of your coworkers and family, and you assume the absolute worst motivations in everyone around you.
It sounds miserable, but it's literally how most of us operate by default.
But then, look at the after. Once you run this new code, you transition to what Ruiz poetically calls heaven on earth. But practically speaking, it just means you are finally free from the invisible script society handed you.
So in the after state, you vigilantly protect your emotional drumline from the chaos of others.
You communicate your needs with absolute, unapologetic clarity.
You adapt to your daily energy fluctuations with grace and self-forgiveness.
And you navigate the immense noise of the modern world with a healthy, balanced skepticism. You finally take ownership of the machine.
Which really is the ultimate takeaway here. When you strip away the ancient Toltec framing and the mystical language, the Four Agreements is fundamentally a masterclass in reclaiming your psychological autonomy.
It really is.
It's about taking a hard look at your smartphone, looking at the invisible code running your life, and realizing that the rigid rules you've been agonizing over were never actually yours to begin with.
No, they were installed by others.
Right. And you have the administrator power to uninstall the bugs, the fear, the assumptions, and the self-judgment.
Which leaves us with a profound, lingering question to ponder long after this deep dive ends.
What's that?
If you were to do that today, if you were to systematically strip away every assumption you've ever made, every piece of societal conditioning you absorbed as a child, and every impossible standard of perfection you've inherited from the dream of the planet,
Yeah.
who is the person actually left underneath? And what kind of agreements would that person choose to make tomorrow morning?